If you're into film photography, the chances are you probably own a couple old cameras like this. This is a Nikon FE from the late 70s, so it's a good 46 years old. And even though it seemed to be working fine when I got it, it did eventually develop some issues. And I debated, should I just replace it or should I just buy a new one? Because these aren't super expensive to get online. They're around $100 for one that appears to be in pretty good condition. And maybe you're having that same debate. Do you pay sometimes more than the cost of replacing the camera to have it serviced, or do you just replace it? Let's talk about that. So I mentioned my Nikon FE. This was a gift. Meant a lot to me. I really enjoyed using it. And it started to develop a jam where basically, you can see right now, the shutter will not work. The mirror gets stuck up. This is in the mechanical M90 setting right now, so it should work even if the battery's not in, and it doesn't. So I tried to do some research, tried to look into what I could do with it. I looked into actually getting it serviced and saw that it would probably cost over $200 to have this camera serviced. But you could replace these cameras for around $100. So I just thought, that doesn't make sense. Why don't I just get another camera? So I did. I got this, a Nikon FE2. This is a little newer, probably around 37 to 41 years old. They made them in between 1983 and 1987. And this was something that I got from Japan on eBay. It was listed in near mint condition, looked great cosmetically. And when I got it, it seemed to be working fine, but there were a couple things. There's a little window here at the front of the camera that reads the aperture ring on the lens, and it'll show up in your viewfinder. It was opaque. I couldn't see through it. Didn't love that. But I figured, maybe I can live with that. And I started using it, started taking pictures, seemed to be working fine. But then again, it started developing a jamming issue. And usually I could correct that just by fiddling with the film advance down here. But it just seemed like, again, maybe I need to get this serviced. So again, I looked into actually having it repaired. And again, the cost was going to be over $200. Now this camera is a little bit more expensive. To replace this in one that's supposedly in good condition, it would be around $200 or about the cost of getting the camera repaired. And I decided that I was going to go ahead and do that because at the end of the day, they're not making these cameras anymore. And it just seems, I don't know, irresponsible, just somehow immoral to just get rid of a camera that could be fixed, taking it out of circulation. And I also thought, okay, if I can get this camera repaired, I will know that I can rely on it for years to come, as opposed to kind of rolling the dice and trying to buy another one that seems to be in good condition online. This way I will know that it's in good condition and I'll know that I can rely on it. And no matter how good a camera might be that's 40 years old, chances are it's going to need some servicing, some lubrication. The foam seals break down. There's always something that could go wrong, corrosion inside the camera. So I decided to take the plunge and get it serviced. And I found a company called ICT Camera. It's International Camera Technicians. They're in Bonito, California. And I decided to send my Nikon FE2 to them, a guy named Jim, to have it serviced. International Camera Technicians, or ICT Camera, ictcamera.com. So this is where I decided to send my camera. They make it fairly easy to fill out a repair request form. You basically put in what's wrong with your camera, what you'd like them to check out. And then you have to give a $50 diagnostic fee. That gets refunded eventually. Stay tuned for that. But if you want to see how much goes into a repair with them, they also have a YouTube channel. It is at ICT Camera 560. And if you peruse some of these videos, you will be floored by just the expertise and how much goes into one of these repairs, because he doesn't just do a repair of whatever issue you might be having with your camera. There will be a complete overhaul. And that's how I found this service, because I was searching on YouTube for things about my Nikon FE2, and he has this whole series of Nikon FE2 reassembly, Nikon FE2 top removal, And if you just look at some of these previews here, the amount of work that goes into this is just ridiculous. Here's the Nikon FE2 adjustment where he actually calibrates the shutter and the light meter in the camera. Just completely exhaustive. And it was through watching these videos that I thought, okay, this is somebody who I can trust with repairing my camera. So I have my invoice here from the repair. The total cost, $225, and then with tax, $228. So that seems really steep, but let's break this down a little bit. Shows labor, overhaul to good working order, $210. Parts needed for repair up to this amount, $40. Shipping and handling, $25. Diagnostic fee was $50. You pay that before you actually have the repair, but then that is refunded. So the total cost, $228. The repair notes on this invoice are interesting. Removed mirror box, replaced internal seals, top and bottom of mirror box, cleaned shutter and lubricated mirror box, cleaned and repaired from minor corrosion in camera, replaced mirror pad and film chamber seals, replaced multiple exposure lever, cleaned and lubricate adjust speeds and meter and auto exposure, check all notes, installed front plate used, and f-stop ring and spring new. So that sounds like a lot of stuff. Sounds like he did a lot of stuff to this camera, a camera that I thought only needed maybe just a slight going over, some cleaning, lubrication, and then replacing that aperture window. A lot more went into actually servicing and repairing this camera. The cool thing is Jim, the technician, made a post on the Facebook Learn Camera Repair page, and I was able to find that post and look a little more closely at what he did to my camera. Pretty interesting stuff. So I saved this post that Jim posted on the Learn Camera Repair Facebook group, and I just want to go through this because it's really interesting. This is my camera, my Nikon FE2. I have been asked a few times why I only do complete CLA service on cameras. So CLA is clean, lubricate, adjust, service on cameras, and why I always have something in parts on the estimate. So he always includes that $40 fee for parts up to $40. This FE2 apparently only had a foggy aperture window on the front cover. All else seemed to work. So when I sent this in, I did mention that there's this little window here under the Nikon logo on the camera that will show you what aperture you're at because it's reading it from the actual lens that you have on. And mine was opaque. I couldn't see through it. And then I was also getting a few jams every once in a while. So all else seemed to work. Knowing this camera, I just pulled the mirror box out, then started cleaning, resealing, and repairing whatever needed attention. When I pulled the front and removed the aperture ring, I found its return spring ready to break. The foggy window was strange in that it didn't want to clean up, so I replaced the whole front cover used. In all, the cover was replaced, the aperture ring springs, mirror box, lower seal, and shutter upper seals, mirror bumper, and film chamber seals. I could have replaced the front cover without removing the mirror box, but then all of those rotten seals would have been left behind. The nearly broken spring was a surprise. I figured it had only a short time before it broke. This is what has to be done nowadays to keep these cameras working and why all cameras get an overhaul price. So let's go through some of these pictures because I find this just absolutely fascinating. So again, as he mentions, it seemed as though there wasn't too much wrong with the camera. It just needed a general servicing. But then once he cracked it open, this is a camera that's probably around 40 years old. He found a lot more going on. So here's just the camera as it came in. He shows this picture here. So this person commented on the post, clearly this is the self-timer, but what is that yellow cover? Access to the wind mechanism? James says, it is an access cover. The green stuff is corrosion that causes Nikon leatherette to bulge. So this is at the front of the camera. If you go back here, it's right around here on the camera. Mine wasn't bulging yet, but I see pictures of these Nikon F cameras all the time where there is this perfect outline of that access cover bulging because of corrosion that's under the leatherette here. So he strips off all the leatherette, completely strips down the camera. So here's another picture that he posted, cover off the camera, a few access holes for adjusting. So he had taken that cover off. Not sure the chemistry behind the green crap, but the brass alloy is reacting with the glue from the leatherette. He shows another picture here with the leatherette stripped off and that brass cover. And if we go to the next picture, look at this. So this is the camera completely strapped down, and look at this foam. You can zoom in a little bit. This is right above the shutter. It's all completely deteriorated. And look, you can already see bits of it that are waiting to fall into the shutter. So he cleaned all this out as well. He replaced this, stripped it all out. Crazy. Here's a close-up of that foam just turning into a different substance entirely. So this person is saying, is that the offending spring? He's talking about the aperture return spring. This is the offending mirror box seal. And so basically this is the seal between the mirror box and the body of the camera. And again, just completely deteriorating, definitely needing to be replaced. Here's that foggy aperture window that I had. And here is that spring. So this is the spring that returns the aperture ring. So not to get too technical, and I don't understand all the technicalities, but as you're adjusting the aperture on the camera, when you take the lens off, this basically returns the aperture ring to where it's supposed to be when you place a new lens on the camera, I think. And it was about to break, and that would have meant my camera wouldn't have worked properly anymore. So here we go. Oh, that is the offending spring. It's weird how one term will corrode, or one will corrode, and the rest of the springs look perfect. Some people saying this isn't uncommon in these old Nikon cameras. But yeah, this spring, you can see the corrosion there if we zoom in a little bit. This spring was, well, let me move this. Oh, here we go. Totally corroded and about to just snap in two. And look at all the dust and dirt in there and everything. This camera looked really cosmetically nice from the outside. I purchased it in, quote, near mint condition off of a seller on eBay. But this is what you had inside. So here's that aperture ring, the return ring, and the spring on the ring. Here is the new cover, I think, that he's going to replace. I think that's my old one with the foggy mirror, or the foggy window. So he just yanked one off an old camera, put that on my camera. Here is the spring as it should look, the broken spring on my camera. Somebody asked the question, is it possible to replace this AI coupling ring with one from an FE or FM to get compatibility with pre-AI lenses? James says, no, they're different beasts. It's a shame none of the meter couplings are the same. The FM and FE do share some transport and rewind components with the FE2 and FM2, but not much else. So getting into some technicalities there. And then this is the camera once again. So just really fascinating pictures of the whole process of this repair. So after waiting several weeks, I was anxiously anticipating getting my camera back, and it finally arrived. This is the repaired Nikon FE2. And, you know, I was just going over some of the functions, feeling how the shutter speeds looked or felt, if they seemed to be, you know, matching up with their speeds, just how the sharpness, the responsiveness of the shutter. I have film in this right now, so I'm not going to actuate the shutter right now. But everything seemed to be in really, really great shape. And then I noticed he included this little thumb drive. It says ictcamera.com on it with the phone number. And it didn't even occur to me to look at this for a while, but then when I finally did, he includes a bunch of pictures of the repair in progress. Let's look at some of those now. And we'll just quickly go through the rest of the pictures that he included on this thumb drive that I didn't even realize held pictures of my camera. I thought it was just a thumb drive for me with the logo of ICT camera on it. But some of these will be repeats that we saw in that Facebook post. But there is my camera. I think this is before the repair. Why isn't this working? Back of the camera. Lord above. So here's the camera with the top off. Crazy. I could never even hope to do a repair like this. More of the electronics. Circuit boards. I guess, you know, all these connections look pretty good. The electronics in this camera are pretty solid state and pretty resilient. There's the bottom of the camera taken off. It's looking at some of the mechanisms in there. There's that brass cover we saw earlier. The foam seal about to fall into the shutter. Here's the mirror box. Like, look at this. Look at how complicated this is. It's just ridiculous. And yeah, there's this foam down here that all got replaced. Look at how dirty the mirror is too. He cleaned all this, lubricated things, replaced all the seals that needed replacing. Just a massive amount of work. And that's the old front cover. This has that foggy aperture window there. There's that spring. There's that window close up. Spring again. So a lot of the same pictures, but you get an even better idea of just how much goes into repairing a camera, completely overhauling it. So now I have a 37 to 41-year-old camera that has been completely overhauled and restored. I now have a working aperture window. It looks like he cleaned out the viewfinder. He cleaned the mirror. He replaced all the internal seals, all the seals for the actual film chamber. He calibrated the meter. He calibrated the shutter speeds. And this camera should work, hopefully, flawlessly for years and years to come. I'm very, very glad that I decided to send this camera in, because every time I took my camera out before, I never knew if this was the roll of film where my camera was going to jam up on me. Was I going to ruin a roll? Was I going to only get a partial roll? And now, knowing that I have this camera in perfect working order, I just have a lot more confidence. And I don't have to think, okay, maybe I'll go online, maybe I'll start looking at other Nikon FEs or FE2s or FMs or FM2s. Maybe I'll get a good one. Maybe I'll pay $200 and get one that has issues. Now I know that this camera is going to work. And here's the repaired and serviced camera. Obviously you can't tell too much just from looking at it, but believe me, it feels precise, it feels sharp, it feels way more responsive now. The shutter speeds feel much more accurate. I'm excited to get some pictures back from this because I just am curious to see how the metering works and everything. I felt like maybe it was a little bit overexposing things before when I was using aperture priority mode in this camera. Replaced all the leatherette, cleaned everything, replaced all the seals, calibrated everything. This is just a fantastic, beautiful camera, and now I know that I can rely on it for years and years to come. Look at this beauty. It's basically brand new. And I'll most likely save money in the long run. Putting a little bit out now, getting a perfectly working camera. I won't have to worry about replacing it, and hopefully it will serve me for many years to come. So that's why, instead of replacing my Nikon FE2, it took me one other camera to learn my lesson. I replaced the FE, but again, I could eventually have this serviced and have this as a backup. Now, after having decided to service this camera, I have learned that it is probably a better idea to service your camera as opposed to just replacing it. Now, it might not always make economic sense to you, but I think maybe a good rule of thumb is if the cost of repair is around the cost of replacing the camera, then you should just go ahead and get it repaired and serviced and know that you can rely on it. But even a camera like this has some sentimental value. It may only cost $100 to replace, but it might be worth it for me, and it probably will be worth it for me to get this camera serviced so I can rely on it in the future. And this one, for sure, I didn't want to spend another $200 on a Nikon FE2 and then have that one develop issues. This one is going to work for me for hopefully decades to come. So thank you so much for watching. I'm your good friend Bradley. You've been the audience. This has been Stuff and Things. I'll see you later.